was my primary piece. For those that may not know some of the things that I've experienced. Community School District 9, we call it South Central Bronx. California has its South Central, and New York City has its South Central. Community School District 9, right in the heart of the Bronx, the second largest district in the city, only to District 10, which was to our north and to our west. There is such a history. When I look to my brother, Minister Brown, I remember in 1984, he was the videographer when we went to Mexico with Dr. Ivan Van Sertima. He was the videographer. We're talking about 1984, 10 years before our son was born, and the same year that our first daughter was born, who is now 31, and our second daughter was yet to be born, 1988. So I'm talking about history and what has actually happened and who's in this room. And so when Elder Sister was talking about Dr. King, she was talking about a living history. She was talking about things that she experienced, which is what as elders we have to give to our children, that living legacy, what we hand down to our children and our experiences. And as I look at Sister Lori, going back all the years, Sister Lori, all the years, she used to edit some of Dr. John Henry Clark's work. She was the editor for his work. Sister Nancy, who was part of the Institute for Youth going back to the 80s. We're talking about 1986. Sister Lori, part of the Institute. So we're talking about a living history here, and I'm so happy to see our young people here. And for some of us who may not have been a part of this process, what this actually represents and what the community is. The community is a continuation of a golden age that we had. And that golden age was the years of First World Alliance. For those that may not know, Sister Kefa and Brother Bill, mid to late 70s, going up into the 90s. At $3 more, you could invest. So think about that. If you buy the book and add $8, you could invest. You're talking about $18. But I think that Dr. John Henry Clark said one of the most important things that the pyramids did, this is the cornerstone of what we have to understand about the pyramids. There's a lot to understand about what would be called the mirrors, as Tony Browder teaches us, the pyramids. One of the most important things that the pyramids represent is the fact that African people in this part of the world decided that they were going to focus on a project, and everything that they were about was going to focus. So if you were a tailor, you tailored according to the pyramids. If you were a chef, you cooked according to the pyramids. If you were a mason, you built bricks for the pyramids. If you made shoes for the people who were building the pyramids. Everything zeroed in on a project. And out of that project, not only were the pyramids the first wonder of the world that still they're trying to figure out, but they also represented African people coming together around a single issue. And out of that, they built one of the greatest civilizations. And it has yet to be matched. And so what we as an African people have to do is we have to find a project that we're willing to invest in. Whatever it may be. But we have to start doing something. This presentation that I'm going to do this afternoon is dealing with a group of African people that is the reason for what I am calling the Renaissance. The Moors brought into existence for Europe what we call the Renaissance. Africans created the Naissance when the Greeks sat at the feet of these African peoples. Learn their legacy. We have to turn around our view towards us. I know that we say we want to step out the box. We want to start to think outside the box. But what I'd like to ask you to consider is the fact that there is no box. And that even in thinking about being in a box is an illusion. Because if I jump out the box and other people are still in the so-called box, I can't see them and they can't see me. But if we should tear down the entire concept that there is even a box, then wherever I go, you can see me and I can see you. Mm. What we're experiencing right now, what we call Western civilization, which the world is experiencing, we can blame peoples of Eurasian descent for the conditions we find ourselves in. And black folk, don't be too hard on yourself. We have our challenges, but Europeans are in a lot of trouble. Amen. See, but we don't see it that way because we're so busy looking inward on us, and they always have us focused on us, that we think it's us. It's an illusion. When someone tells a perfect lie, the truth is unbelievable. Mm. And the reality of it is that white supremacy, people say, man, don't use the word white supremacy. It's an oxymoron. Oxymoron meaning the words that contradict each other. White can't be supreme. They have never done anything to be supreme. In fact, the only thing that Europeans ever existed was the patent office. Because they stole everybody's idea and put their name on it. Okay. And the Moors is an example of it. The so-called Greek concept is an illusion. It doesn't exist. There is no Greek language. There were no Greek people. It doesn't exist when you look at it from a historical perspective. We are on the verge, as George Clinton said with the Parliament Funkadelics, we are on the verge of getting it on. That's why Trump is so popular. Kwame Ture used to say, whenever you, as close as God, the closer you get to God, the closer the devil's going to get to you. And I remember when he used to tell us this, to realize that all the things that we're catching, the reason why we have our Sandra Blands, what is in a grown man that would find Sandra Bland a threat, the way in which she conducted herself? What would make a policeman shoot a man in the back 8 times? It has to be a deep-seated fear, because the guy wasn't even up in his face. But you see, we don't see this. We don't see this. When I say we, I'm speaking to the choir, so I'm not necessarily talking to you. What I am saying is that we have to break out of the illusion that we've been experiencing. They don't hate black folk. They fear black folk. Dr. Francis Chris Wilson taught us about genetic annihilation. History teaches us that the only people on the planet, there is only one race on our planet, and that is the human race. And that human race was conceived and born, nurtured, sustained, and educated. And as Dr. Clark teaches us, after Africans got their show together, then they took it on the road. And they peopled the planet. They have found bones, according to Dr. David Imhotep, in San Diego, California, of a black woman, 90,000 years old. The first Americans were Africans, by Dr. David Imhotep. Don't believe a word I say. Because I'm not here to make you believe me. I'm just here to make you think. This is an illusion that we're experiencing, family. We could get up out of this immediately. We could. We have it in us to get us out of this immediately. The question is, will we do it? Do we have the will to do it? And how? Paul Anderson has already written books. George Fraser has already written books. Just that quote of Dr. Martin Luther King at the end of your presentation, it said it all. The last speech that I remember in the Masonic Temple, Dr. King laid it out for us. See, they only played the last 1 minute and 19 seconds when he starts talking about we got some sick brothers out there. Or they start, see, they don't even start there. They start right after he said that, because right before he said, I don't know what's going to happen with me now. Just before he said that, he said, we got some sick white brothers out there. Family, we got this laid out. We can do this. You want to know? I can prove to you we can do this. I can prove to you right now we can do this. We had 2 opportunities to get ourselves out of the problem that we had. And while I have respect for what we did to do it, I also understand had we just rerouted our intentions and our money, we would have been free. And the first time happened the Million Man March. The second one was in the 20th reunion of the 20th year of the Million Man March. Let me tell you what I mean by that. First of all, let me tell you I respect everyone that went. I have no problems. And I respect that some of us need that camaraderie to move forward. But let me just offer you one concept. The last Million Man March that was held last year, suppose we had beamed in all those great speakers into the Brooklyn Christian Center, into the Mariam Mosque in Chicago, into the Marcus Garvey School in Los Angeles. Suppose we had just beamed all of those in, and we in New York came here, in Brooklyn. We had it up in the National Black Theater in New York. Suppose it was beamed in. Suppose none of us actually went to Washington, D.C. Because you know who was happy we marched? Delta, U.S. Airways, Trailways, Hotel, Motel, Holiday Inn. Even the police got paid overtime for that march. Restaurants, they said, come on back. In fact, don't wait 20 years. Come back next year, 21 years. Think about what I'm saying. Suppose it took, and took more than this, suppose it took $500 for each and every one of us to get to that march. Let's just say. It took much more than that. But let's say $500. Let's be conservative. $500. Suppose after it had been beamed in, suppose we decided that's when we're going to march to the nearest African-American owned store and spend half of what it would have taken to get to D.C. We would have shut America down that day. Dr. John Henry Clark said the only thing marching does is wears out the soles of your shoes. Of course, I respect people that march. Now, please understand what I'm saying, because I understand why we march. But if after 50 years we're still marching, and we're still in the same place, something tells me about that strategy. Something tells me about that strategy. The spirit of what happened was there. Dr. Martin Luther King and Malcolm X were two brothers we needed amongst us, desperately. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad is probably one of the greatest human beings to live in the 20th century. But Malcolm would not have been who he became if it had not been for Honorable Elijah Muhammad. But Honorable Elijah Muhammad wouldn't have been who he was had it not been for the Honorable Noble Drew Ali. Because we got to understand who the Honorable Noble Drew Ali was. And the role that he played in African and African-American history. He revolutionized the way in which African people thought. Not to mention him living concurrently with the Most Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey, who was impacted by Booker T. Washington. We can do this, family. The question becomes, what has to happen in our minds? If we say, you know something, I think I'm not going to crack Donald for 2 visits. Yes, crack Donald. Murder King. Haunted Castle. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. We're not going to go twice. And that's going to probably add up to $18. That'll probably add up to $18, maybe $9 per visit. And not to mention the fact that the only residual that you're going to get from that experience is going to be in your bathroom that night. Hopefully not you regurgitate what they're feeding you, but that's a whole other story. The point I'm making, families, we can do this. The years that I've spent observing us and knowing us, we are such a powerful people. We just don't understand how powerful we really are, really. We are the best of the best. Elder sister, for you to have gone through what you went through and to still be sitting here, smiling, that's a spirit that goes beyond. Tomorrow they're going to spend all day calling out the names of the people who died in 9/11. My heart goes out to any innocent person that died, but do you know how long it would take for us to call out every ancestor name that died during the transatlantic experience? If we started 20 years ago, we'd still be calling our ancestors' names out right now. So don't tell me about terrorism. I know terrorism. I've lived terrorism. I know terrorism, and I know terrorists.
Define terrorism. You know who did it for sure. Right?
That's it. We know. Who better than us to know? They keep saying that 9/11 was the worst thing that happened in American history. No, it wasn't. It was when a white man came here 400 years ago. That's the worst thing that ever happened in America. But what we're talking about, does it make sense to you? But if it makes sense to us, family, what are we going to do when we leave this room today? That's my question. We can applaud, we can feel good about all that I'm saying, because you know what I'm saying rings real with you. But the question becomes, in honor of Dr. King and all those that marched with him and did what they did, laid their lives out on the line, and Malcolm X, who put his life on the line, young, handsome brother with 6 children, 4 he knew of, 2 on the way. All of our ancestors, and Harriet Tubman, who did what she didn't do what she did for us to stop saying how difficult times are. That sister was 93 years old in Auburn, New York, collecting food and money for a senior citizens home that she ran at 93. Every morning that I get up, that I may think I'm having a difficult day, I call upon my hero's spirit. My hero is Harriet Tubman. And I say, whatever the spirit... See, when Denzel Washington played Malcolm X, they said to him, did you invoke the spirit of Malcolm when you played that part so well? And he said, no. He said, I invoked the spirit that was in Malcolm. Because I'm not Malcolm, but we all have the spirit of rebellion in us. We all have the spirit that Malcolm had. Each and every one of us has it. So he invoked that spirit. So the spirit that I invoke is not the spirit of Harriet Tubman. It's the spirit that was in Harriet Tubman that got her to get up. After she freed herself, I would have said, Harriet, you did great. But I'd have been talking to her back because she was going back down to pull some more folk up.
That's right.
And she did this 18, 19. We really don't know the count. We really don't know the way in which she did it. But we do know one thing. She quoted and said that her greatest achievement was her greatest disappointment. Her greatest achievement was that she freed thousands of slaves. Her greatest disappointment was she realized she could have freed thousands more had they only known they were slaves. We got folk out on Atlantic Avenue. They're slaves. Because the great attorney at war, Alton Maddox, teaches us that being a slave is a mental thing. Our ancestors were on the plantation as prisoners, held against their will. Slavery is when you give up your spirit and you allow yourself to be manipulated by the illusion of white supremacy. They can't be supreme because they ain't never done anything supreme. Look at the world we're living in. Look at the spiritual. I'm writing a book. It's called Spirituality Before Religions. I have a 2-part DVD on the table where I did a 2-part series on the outline of this book. And what I did is I analyzed the script of our ancestors in Kemet, in Egypt, the Memphite text, the pyramid text, the coffin text, and the book of the coming forth today by night. And what I am doing in this book is I am not mentioning one religion, but every religion will see their scripture on the walls of ancient Kemet. Even when it comes to the Eucharist, the actual sacrificial concept of changing that wafer into the body of Christ and the water and wine into his blood, you can see carved on the walls of the pyramid text in the sarcophagus chamber. You can see it carved there, where they're attempting to ingest, to bring inside of them the God. They're not actually eating the God, but what they're saying is that the one thing that creates the person is what you eat. You are what you eat. That's where the proverb comes from. You are what you eat. So if you eat the God, you become the God. It wasn't about actually a cannibalistic, vampiristic experience. That's what they thought. That's it. They had the mummy parties in France, thinking that if they ate the mummy, they would ingest the greatness of the mummy. But it was symbolic. It was a metaphor for something else much greater than that. The world that we're living in is a world at war. And everybody's major religious God is the one that is telling them to fight each other. Now that is a mean God to me. The Muslims say, Allah told me I can get you. The Christian church say, God told me I can get you. The Jewish faith is saying, in my Torah, it is divine destiny for me to kill you. I just want the real God to please stand up. Who's right? That's a mean God. If there's only one God and they're telling each of their participants to kill each other, I think somebody's trying to annihilate the human family. So we have to do something, family. We have to do something, and we have to do something now, and there's no reason why it can't come up out of this world. As Chancellor Williams says in The Destruction of Black Civilization, somebody's going to say something. And that is going to catch in the room. And more people are going to catch on to it. See, we're looking for this Savior to come to save us, not realizing that we must save ourselves. We have to understand that no matter how we look at spirituality or religions, that each and every one of us is God having a human experience. And that there is no God out there, and there's no God inside, that we are the walking God on earth that is attempting to find the God within us in order to unite with the God without us, which is outside of us. And in so doing, we return back to the waters. That's what our ancestors were talking about when they were talking about the waters of Nun. In science, we call it hydrogen.
Yes.
Our ancestors had it down. And Dr. Gabriel Yibo has put it into a formula where he says G equals what?
God.
I, comma, J.
The source of all energy.
The theory of everything. We got it. All we got to do is do something about it.
That's right.
And if not now, when? And if not us, who? Somewhere along the line. And our ancestors showed it from the very beginning. We went around the 60s saying, black is beautiful. Black power. Science now teaches us that not only is black beautiful, black is the only thing that exists. Everything comes out of the black. If I could do it with the young people here, I could do it. If I had a piece of white paper and I gave each one of them, all the young people in here, I gave them all of the primary colors. And you draw a line. First do red, then do orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, purple. What's the color at the end? What color is the line at the end?
Black.
It's black. Because all colors return back to its origins. This is science. This is soul science. This is not something that I'm trying to emotionally get caught up in something and trying to get us to think that we're somebody that we're not. We're not. We are everything. And the Creator has been talking to us for 400 years. And the Creator said, look, to the Kemites. He said, look, now, y'all been living in heaven for a very long time. You all theorize what hell is because you know the law of opposites, but you don't know what hell is. You know what heaven is, but you don't know what hell is. And there's going to come a time on the earth where you're going to have to know what hell is. So what I'm going to do is somewhere along this process, I'm going to pull a group of y'all out and I'm going to place y'all in hell. So he did that because she knew what she was doing. Took a group of those Africans with that DNA of the pyramid builders, placed them on the plantations of America. And in so doing, the DNA of the pyramids came and epigenetically became the pyramid of the plantations. And we lived in hell. And the folk that put us in hell, they acted on behalf of their master that we call the devil. And after we got off the plantation, the ancestors said, well, we're not through yet because we're going to put you in purgatory. So we're going to take you off the plantation, but we're going to put you in the projects. Because y'all ain't learned your lesson yet. I want you to stop and think about what you've experienced on the plantation. And we're going to send some of y'all out to remind you of what it was like when you were in the pyramids. He said, because one of you is going to come and talk about the fourth place where I'm going to bring you. But you got to know heaven, you got to know hell, and you need time to think about it before I put you back in the promised land. So from the pyramids, we went to the plantations and to the projects, and we are now on our way to the promised land. Because Dr. King was right. He told us he wasn't going to get there with us, but he knew that night. Now, why did he say that? Why did he say the night before, he said, I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight. Why did he say tonight? Why didn't he say, I'm going to tell you this in a week? Because that brother knew through divine intervention he was not going to be with us 24 hours from the moment he was talking to us. So I'm not worried about a thing. I'm not worried about any man. I'm not worried about any woman. Don't worry about who gets in the White House. Two sides of the same coin. Malcolm taught us, Democrats are sly fox, Republicans are brute wolves, but they both belong to the dog family. Don't ever forget that family. Hillary don't mean us any more good than the others. They all use this. So let's be very clear with this. But also let us understand the strategy of what the vote places, because, by the way, this is all a warm-up to what I want to talk to you about. We're going to war, and on our table we have a gun, we have a knife, and we have a pen. What you going to do?
Get on.
Say again? You take them all. Because the gun may stop shooting, the knife may fall on the floor, but you still can use the pen as a weapon. The vote is part of our weapon. It's part of what's in our arsenal. Don't give that vote up. Don't think it's going to do anything for you as it relates to actually voting for someone who's going to have. Look, if a black man was in the office for 8 years and he couldn't do anything, what do you think they're going to do? But what's most important, family, is that we as a black people have to understand that if it is to be, it's up to me. That should be our chant. If it is to be, it's up to me. Don't depend on nobody for nothing. Dr. Clark has a presentation and it's entitled, You Ain't Got No Friends. Google it. We ain't got no friends. Billie Holiday used to sing, sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Do you know what a child feels like that ain't got no mother? That has been our evolution here. That has been our growth process here. But guess what? That's a reason to celebrate, because look, we're here. Yeah, we've been through that, but remember, we had to go through hell to get to the promised land. How do you know what heaven is if you don't know hell? We've been through hell. Nobody's been through what we've been through. With due respect to all people around the world, nobody understands what continental Africans went through in this environment that we call the United States of America.
That's right.
And everything that people come to this country for to benefit from was built on our backs.
Everything.
And I ain't asking nobody to give me nothing. I ain't asking you to hire me. I'm just saying, have enough respect to understand how you got here.
Mm-hmm.
And understand that when you see certain things happening here, first check out the history, and then you understand. Because if y'all don't come to us to sit at our feet to understand who you're dealing with, you're going to end up with people telling you that they're going to build a wall across the United States to keep you out. And if you don't know your history, you're not even going to know that you were the ones they forced south in the first place so they could take over the land. Because when you go to California, it's according to who you ask who the illegal alien is.
That's right.
We got to do this for our children and yet those unborn. This is a class that I teach. When I taught at New Paltz, they didn't, I had to phrase it. I couldn't call it the Moors. I called it Africans in Medieval Europe. And so I taught this class on the Moors. And what I'd like to do is just go over with the overview of the important things as it relates to what we should be looking at. Can somebody hit the lights here, please?
Yeah, I get it.
And basically, what today's presentation is, Africans in medieval Europe will include explorations of concepts in African and European civilizations. Presentations will include the research on settlements and subsequent movement of African people into southern Spain in 710. To the defeat of the last recorded African ruler Boabdil in Granada, Spain, on January 2nd, 1492. Then you do the course objective. Not going to go through because time won't let us do it. But here's the books that I want you to consider. The first book, of course, is The Golden Age of the Moors, edited by Dr. Ivan Van Sertima. The next book that I used was also by Dr. Van Sertima. It was called The African Presence in Early Europe. And then in terms of the reading assignments, I put different initials in terms of like GAM. Whenever you saw GAM, it meant Golden Age of the Moor. And then I had the initials of the author in the front. So basically what I'm looking at in terms of, first of all, race and origins of Africans in early Europe. That's one of the first things that you have to look at when you consider looking at Africans in Europe. And I have the essays there. The second class, well, that was the second class. The first class, the third class is the origin of Africans in Europe. The fourth class is Africans in the ancient Mediterranean Isles and mainland Greece. And I'm going to explain that to you more as we get into that, because you can never look at anything out of in a vacuum, because you'll never understand. It's what I call episodic history, as opposed to sequential history. Sequential history is when you understand all the steps that led to something happening. I'll give you an example. With due respect to Dr. Louis Gates. Well, first, he's not necessarily a historian, but that's okay. But the other thing is he's an episodic historian. He gives you African history in episodes. He'll look at Ethiopia at a certain time. He'll look at blacks in Latin America at a certain time. But there is no way that you could understand how that happened without understanding the things that led up to Kemet, up to Ethiopia, up to the 25th dynasty, or the 6th Napatan dynasty of Nubia. So what you have to go back. And you have to ask yourself, how did human life emerge from Africa? What was it that allowed life to emerge out of Africa? And that is going to lead to understanding the African origins in Europe. Because Europeans don't exist. Who we call Eurasians are really, see, this is why we have to be careful with concepts like light complexion and dark complexion. There's no such thing as light complexion and dark complexion. There is pigmented and less pigmented. There's no such thing as a complexion. It doesn't exist. What we're looking at when we look at brown skin is pigmented skin. When we look at someone who is less pigmented, we're looking at someone with less pigmented skin. But also to understand melanin, you also have to understand that you could have someone of light complexion of African descent who is deeply melanated in their eumelanin, which is the melanin that's in your muscles and your bones and your organs and your glands. And then you have to deal with neuromelanin, which is the melanin in the brain. So melanin has to be dealt with as it relates to the scientific concept. Light complexion and dark complexion doesn't exist scientifically. Those are not terms that you can use in science. It's social. And the reason why you do it socially is because you create categories of people that you then can define like Blumenbach did, that according to your complexion determines your hierarchy in the society. It's an illusion. The Moors from prehistory to the Moorish dynasty, Moors in medieval Europe, Moorish contributions to European culture and civilization, Moors in language arts, Othello, and the Three Musketeers. You have to understand the role that black folk played. We built the first universities. We'll talk about it as time goes on this afternoon. We built, they didn't have no schools in Europe. They have soap. We brought in this thing that used to disinfect our bodies, and it was called spiritual waters, alcohol, which we now call alcohol. We brought that in. Othello, interesting thing. When I taught Othello, you know, Othello is a very interesting story. And it's unfortunate that it's not told as the classic, because Othello was dealing with two different things. Along with being black, being an African in Italy. Now, what you have to ask yourself, why is an African in Venetia? Why is he there? But not only that, but the challenge, the story that Shakespeare was attempting to tell was not just a story of a man of pigmentation married to Desdemona, who was a woman who was of depigmented structure, but he was also an older man with a younger girl. So in that whole story, what we miss is that other dynamic of ageism when we talk about Othello. Because not only was he threatened by the individual that was said to be courting his wife, but he was also threatened because he was a younger man. So it just wasn't the complexion, it was also the age of Othello, because he was a senior at this time. He was a senior general that was somewhere in his 60s and 70s, who this young girl of Venetian descent loved, and she was attracted to him. And it was playing with his head. Was it his color or was it his age? And he was trying to deal with that. That's a whole other story. Alexander Dumas. Alexander Dumas, first and foremost, you have to look at his father, Thomas Alexander Dumas, whose mother was from Haiti, Marie Dumas. And if you remember in the Three Musketeers, which I use, but I don't use that book, Alexander Dumas, as the classic of that class. I use another story that Alexander Dumas wrote entitled Georges, Georges, because you have to understand there was an elder to his father, Thomas Dumas, whose name was Chevalier Saint Georges, who was not only the master fencer of Europe, but he was the greatest violinist of Europe. And Alexander Dumas, Thomas, the father, and Chevalier St. George, who was elder to Thomas Dumas, were very good friends. There is a story about Thomas Dumas, father of the writer who we call Alexander Dumas, where he was such a powerful general that he once fought 3 fencers in one day and defeated them. Now, let's go back to the 3 Musketeers for those of us who have read this book. How does it open up? How does the 3 Musketeers open up? Brother Shemsu? D'Artagnan
gets into the fight with all 3 Musketeers.
That's it.
At the very morning, yeah.
That's it. And that is how Alexander Dumas pays tribute to his father in the 3 Musketeers. By the story of Thomas Dumas being one of the greatest, if not the greatest fencer at this time, because Chevalier is an elder man by now. He's already been in prison. That in the 3 Musketeers, the opening scene is D'Artagnan. Okay, D'Artagnan is going to fence 3 fencers, or 3 Musketeers. Alexander Dumas was 4 years old when his father died. Thomas Dumas was 44 when he died. Thomas Dumas was the individual that opened up Egypt for Napoleon to bring in all of those individuals that would now decipher Kemetic legacy. Thomas Dumas was the one that went in first. And he opened up Egypt for Napoleon to come in. Because we are, well, first of all, we're not aware that Thomas Dumas was black. But the other thing we're not aware of is the fact that Thomas Dumas also was loved in France. He was viewed as a great hero. Napoleon and Dumas are in Egypt together, and word comes back that somebody's going to come back to France. And they say the first person that comes back is going to become the emperor. Napoleon outranks Thomas Dumas. So what he does, he sends Thomas Dumas back to France. But he lets the Austrians know where he is. So they capture him. And they put him in jail, which gives Napoleon time to do what he's going to do to get back to France to become emperor. Now, if Thomas Dumas had been able to get back to France before Napoleon, guess who would have been emperor of France that we would be calling his name today? It would have been that black man, Thomas Alexander Dumas. But I told that story because, well, first of all, you need to know that. But second of all, part of the reason why he died so young was because of the way he was treated in prison. And that later would lead to his death. Thomas Dumas. Please, Shemsu.
Napoleon was a Corsican, correct?
Yeah, and part Italian.
He wasn't a Frenchman.
There was no such thing as French. French didn't exist. Russia didn't exist. None of these countries existed. Spain didn't exist. The Spanish language didn't exist until the 16th century. Wasn't nobody speaking Spanish before then. Italian language didn't exist. Roman language don't exist. Roman language is an offshoot of the Greek alphabet, and the Greek alphabet don't exist. The Greek alphabet is another script that they learned from Africans. The Rosetta Stone is hieroglyphs, hieratic, and then it's another script of African peoples that the Greeks took on that becomes what we call classical Greek. Every one of the alphabetical letters comes out of the Medunetta. The A came out of the vulture. The M came out of the owl. Look at the Medunetta symbols. You'll see the script. If you don't believe me, then get a book called The Historical Origins of Christianity by Walter Williams. He's got a chart showing you where the Kemetic language became Greek, became Roman, so that when we're writing our ABCs, our children don't know we're writing our alphabet. Greeks don't have an alphabet. Greeks don't have a language. To have a language, you must have a script identified with that particular script or language. English isn't a language. Spanish isn't a language. German isn't a language. They all use Greek script. But Greek script is African script. They made additions, but they didn't invent it. And we know by looking at Kustal, which is in Nubia, The alphabet that we know today came out of what we today call Cush. It was born overnight in Egypt. When the first dynasty was created, when it was set in place by Menefer, the language and the script was already in existence, and Kustal proves that African people created the script that would be brought into Kemet. This is our history. But when someone tells a perfect lie, the truth is unbelievable. So someone robbed your house, and they convince you that their furniture is theirs. That's what they did. These folk ain't done nothing. No, there's only one thing that they're very good at. There's one thing they got us beat. They're very good at this. They can smell like a dog their moment of survival to their moment of annihilation. And they will do anything to survive. My mother used to say, Skip, that's my nickname, Skip, you ain't getting water from a rock, blood from a turnip, or a moral code from Eurasians. So don't try to get something you ain't gonna get. And I'm still trying to figure out after these past 400 years, why do we still think that we're gonna get some type of morality out of them as a people? I don't speak in absolutes. But I remember Dr. Edward Scobie used to always say, Booker, don't tell me nothing about no good white people. Because he said good white people act as shields for the black ones, for the bad ones. And then I remember the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, who said there are 1,000 wolves outside your door. There's 100 that would put their life on the line for you. They would do anything they could to help you survive, to protect you. They put their own life on the line so that you would live. 100 of them out of the 1,000. The problem is you don't know where they are in that group. Are you ready to go outside? Not me. Because I don't know where those 100 are. And when I do go out, I'm going to be prepared for the 900. See, that's another thing. See, we go outside knowing the wolf is outside. Then when the wolf bites us, we get upset. But you knew it was a wolf when you looked out your window. So why are you upset that the wolf is acting like a wolf? The wolf is in her nature. They're doing what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to bite you. You're supposed to make sure they don't. So we're going to wrap this up because I know that there are other things that I really would like to talk to you about. And what I would like to now get into and talk to you about is geography. And one of the first things that I think is important to look at that's smaller. I should have left it alone. Okay, what you have here is a picture of medieval Nubia, because it's very important to understand what's going to happen during medieval Nubia. It's very important to understand that here in medieval Nubia, going into Egypt, you're going to have civilizations. That's very important to understand because that is what's going to be part of what's going to educate and push those North and Northwest Africans into Spain. You have to understand, you're going to have people that are known as Prester John, who was very instrumental during the Crusades. You're going to have people of Ethiopian background that are going to be adapted into Christianity. You're going to have people adapted into Islam who are going to play major roles in the Crusades. So there are African people who are maintaining the Kushite identity, Kushite information during this time. Without understanding this, it's difficult to understand where these Africans getting this information. This right here that you're looking at is where, bless you, where Islam comes from. Islam was not created post 600 AD. The spiritual system that we call Islam today was brought up out of the mountains of Ethiopia into Saudi Arabia. when Bilal came back over and made a move on the major city in Saudi Arabia known as Ma'at Ka, the spirit of Ma'at, which we today call what? Mecca. And that Kaba stone that we circle 7 times is a remnant of the astronomical observatory. Don't believe me? Get a book called Egyptian Sacred Science in Al-Islam by Thomas Goodwin and Rafiq Bilal. It's outlined in the book. Islam as a spiritual system did not exist until somewhere around 700. It didn't exist. There was no Quran at this time. It came later from Africans. And that's why there was a certain point in time where Islam split, Shiite, Sunni, and they split along color lines. Nobadia was one of the major cities of medieval Nubia at the time. Here you have the Moors. This is going to be what is going to be the Almoravid Empire at its height. Here you have Morocco. Ceuta is going to become a very important city. It's going to be at the tip of North Africa. Gibraltar, that is going to be where you could not get into Spain without going through Ceuta. Here you have this entire empire that is controlling things, and it's directly going into Spain. This is going to be the second dynasty, which we'll go over. It's the second dynasty of the Moors in Spain. I'm just going over the geography because I want you to visually see things. Because one of the things that I learned when I went to Kemet in 1983 and 1987, I came back, I was so motivated to teach about Egypt. I showed my slides to I was a kindergarten teacher. Showed them the slides. I mean, I was just so excited. And you know, 5-year-olds can pick up your spirit. They're excited too, you know. And I showed them the pyramids. I showed them pictures of children in Aswan. And oh, they were so excited. And they raised their hand. They say, Brother Booker T, next time we have a class trip, can we go to ancient Egypt? And one of the things I came to realize is called spatiality in teaching. Like, for instance, if you take one big ball and you have 5 little balls and you ask children which is more, they'll pick the big ball many times. Because to them, largeness is more. It's called spatiality. Even though there's 5 small balls, there's one big ball. It's called spatiality. What I came to realize teaching-wise, is that before you can teach a class, this is my own personal opinion, before you can teach a class, you've got to place the learner in space and time. Space is geography and time is history. When I was excited about Egypt, the children didn't understand that ancient meant long ago and Egypt was far away. So to them, I made it so real, the slides are right in front of them. To them, they could go to Egypt on the next class trip. You see? So that what I'm doing with you now is I'm creating visuals for you. I'm creating a geographical geography. Graphio, graphic is picture, geo is the earth. I'm creating a picture of the earth for you to take the visual in, so that as I take you through the Moors in Europe, you understand better. Okay? And with our children, this is what we need to also always consider. Always ground them in space and time. Space first. Because if you know where you are, you know where you can go. If you know what time it is, it doesn't make a difference if I'm talking about long ago or right now. Because they know now the time that I'm talking about. Normally what I do is I do a timeline. And I put the 00 mark. And I say, the 00 mark is when you were born. Now for homework, I want you to write 3 things that happened after you were born. And then I want you to talk to someone in your house and find out 3 things that happened before you were born. And that gives them an idea or a perception of how to separate BC from AC. Because now they know that the 00 mark is the day I was born. And everything after me is there. And I know that. But the things that happened before me, I have to ask somebody else because I wasn't here. You see, so it gives them research skills, and it also lets them understand that we're talking about long ago, which many people can't get to. Well, children can't sometimes. Okay. Okay, this is a map that is going to show you Kustal. This is Tarseti, or what we might call Nubia. One of the things that we have to do, and I encourage us to read the book and the essay, is called The Six Napatan Dynasty by Peggy Brooks Bertram. I think we're looking at Egypt through Eurasian eyes. In other words, for those that may not see, there's a red line here. There's a red line that's in tape right in front of me. Okay? Now, the way you're looking at it, let's say that this is before, and this line represents the first dynasty of Kemet. This line is the first dynasty of Kemet, or Egypt. Everything over here is pre-first dynasty. Everything over here is after the first dynasty. So over on this side, you're going to have what we might call the classical or Old Kingdom, Middle Kingdom, New Kingdom, and 25th Dynasty, over there. Okay, now, we say, when we're here, that this is the Old Kingdom. Okay, the reason why we say this is the Old Kingdom is because Eurasians who are studying this history are looking at that from over here. It's old. I am saying, to look at it from African eyes, you have to go to Kush, over here. And you have to look at the Old Kingdom as if that's old. Because a lot has happened. The Old Kingdom is old because nothing new ever happened different after the Old Kingdom. The Middle Kingdom, the New Kingdom, and even the 25th Dynasty tried to resurrect the greatness of the Old Kingdom. No matter what they did, it was based on what happened then. And the reason why is because Africans brought in some of the greatest information, some of the greatest civilizations came from Kustal. Kustal is that waiting point that is going to have Africans, evidence that's going to be 9 to 15 generations before the first dynasty. Africans are going to be here, and they're going to push up. And in Edfu, there is a text that's called the text of Heru, let's say. This is the city of Heru in Edfu. And in there, they're saying that there was a king, Horus, that moved north and took over the first kingdom and beat the so-called Scorpion. By the way, was another African. You know, I mean, people do a lot of talking. You know, they make folk into people that they're not. You know, it's like Beethoven. If Beethoven came back and looked at the statues and pictures that are drawn of him today, he wouldn't even know who that was. You know who Beethoven looked like? Frederick Douglass. If you want, and the reason why I know is because I went to a Black History celebration and I saw a picture way at the end of the hall. And I said, wow, that's interesting. Look at Frederick Douglass down there. When I got up there, it was a picture of Beethoven. But I'm going to show you a picture of Beethoven. So you'll see for yourself what he looked like. But see, they don't put this in the book. You know, I got a book called Beethoven's Hair, because they're really caught up in his hair. They're really wondering why his hair looked like that. And outside of his home in Bonn, Germany, and in Vienna, Austria, there's a sign that says Schwarzer Spanier-Haus, which means the Black Spaniard's house. That's why he used to have to eat in the kitchen with the maids. And he had a very bad attitude, and they report about what a bad attitude he had with people, okay? Something like what we might call the Colin Kaepernick effect. Having a bad attitude, because you're tired of people pushing you around. So you put their picture on your socks. Beethoven was a brother that had enough of white supremacy. And so did Chevalier St. George, too. That's why he was whipping all them people in fencing. Because he said, this is one brother that's going to take you out today. You may go back to your house and mess with the brothers and sisters there, but I'm going to take care of your business right now. Chevalier St. George's mother was from Martinique. She's a black woman from Martinique. So, the final picture that I'd like to show you is really, I have to take you back to maybe 291, somewhere around there with Numidia and with Carthage. There's a story that hasn't been told about the kingdoms of Numidia, because that's another kingdom that many people are not aware of. Numidia, N-U-M-I-D-I-A, Numidia. And one of the themes of today's presentation that I want to give to you right now is this. Along with all the economics and all the other things we're talking about, family, we must stop fighting amongst ourselves.
That's right.
That's the first step to our liberation. We have got to, once and for all, bury Willie Lynch. Because the reason why Hannibal Lost, which is not discussed, because I know it's kind of hard for us to talk about these things. The reason why Hannibal lost was because Numidia, an African nation, sided with the Romans. Now, why did Numidia side with the Romans? Because the Carthaginians were mistreating the Numidians. And so what did they do? They do what they always do. They took advantage of the dissension between the two groups. They divided and they conquered. And that's how Rome won. That's the only way Rome won. When I look at our history from Kemet to the Punic Wars, to the Moors, the reason why the Moors fell in Granada was because we were fighting amongst ourselves. Even to this very day, they can get folk to stand up and say just about anything. Can I tell you something? Because I know. When I was teaching summer school to my 8th grade, this was in the 2000s, I used to use a book during summer school. It was called Gifted Hands. It was written by probably one of the foremost neurosurgeons in the world.
Ben Carson.
Dr. Ben Carson. What a phenomenal genius. Wow. The operations and the techniques that he applied had never been known. It was almost like the way Beethoven played the piano was the way Ben Carson performed surgery. I have to thank Ben Carson, not just for his genius in neurosurgery, not just because of the life he led as a doctor, but because of the lesson I learned over the past year and a half of observing him. And here's the lesson that I learned. Don't cross lanes. Stay in your lane.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Stay in your, that's not to say that people cannot be geniuses in many lanes. But when you get into another lane and you realize that you're not successful, get back in your lane quick. I learned that, you know. I'm into education. I believe I flourish in education. I believe that is where I'm passionate. This is where my gift is. This is what I feel. I think you can feel my feelings just by what I'm doing. I love this. With our children, with our community, I just vibe on this. Dr. John Henry Clark years ago wished on me. He said, I'm going to wish on you what I'm about to tell you about me. He said, I am doing what I was born to do. That is the greatest thing in the world, to become an elder and to know that you're doing what you were born to do. The saddest thing is to become an elder and wish you had done something else. It haunts you. It becomes a cloud over your head every day. It infiltrates your dreams when you wish you were doing something else. Dr. Ben Carson taught me a fundamental lesson, that the greatest genius in one area can become an absolute fool in another. when you are not ready to be in that lane. And to me, it becomes important for us all to understand, what lane are we in? Where's your lane? Where's your gift? Where's your passion? Where is it that you love to do? What is it that if you could do it for free, you would do it? Because people say, well, how do I find my passion? Well, think about what you would do for free. Because there's a chance that if you would do it for free, you do it because you love it. And because you love it, you're going to do it well. And because you do it well, someone else will pay you for doing it so well. And so in our educational system, we have to assist our children in finding that gift that the Creator has given them. There's a gift that each and every one of us has. And other people may have the same gift, but only you can do it the way the Creator gave it to you to do. So there's no competition, there's no envy, there's no anger. In fact, I promote you in what you do. If it's in my lane, I promote you, because as you move forward, I move forward with you. By the nature of a community effect. So I'm not threatened by a better teacher. I realize I can learn from that better teacher. I want to be around you. I want to learn from you. And so we all rise as we support each other rising. Because you see, the moon don't have no shine. The moon has light. And the moonlight is sunshine. And so everybody's not going to be the sun every day. Some of us have to be the moon. But if we position ourselves well in the presence of the sun, we will get some light. And so I've often celebrated that concept that I may be the sun today, but you may be the sun tomorrow. Let me shine on you, on your moonlight, so that you'll shine on me tomorrow, so I can create my moonlight. That is how African, that is what the communiversity is about. It is the community's universe. City. That's what it means. The community's universe city. All of us together make things happen. And so here you have Numidia, who is going to support the northern Germanic tribes that are going to come down, that we call, who we call the Romans. They're going to, the Romans are going to come down and come upon an African people known as the Etruscans. They're going to defeat the Etruscans. They're going to take over this area that is around 7 mountains known as the Latiums. And that is where the word Latin comes from. Latium. So, that is the geography. Now, this is a workbook that I've developed. Is the Panther Princess. Bastet. Basically, what I want to show you is that this is a timeline of the Moors in Spain. You're basically going to deal with 3 different dynasties over from 710 to 1492. The first dynasty is going to be called the Umayyad or the Abbasid. It's going to exist from 710 to 1086 AD. This dynasty will exist for approximately 376 years. The next is going to be the Almoravid. The Almoravid is going to exist from 1086 AD until 1194, which is 108 years. Now, you already see that the Umayyad Abbasid is older than the United States of America. You're going to move into the next one from 1194 until 1492. You're going to have the Almohade dynasty. Now, this Almohade is going to get caught up in fighting amongst themselves. And that is what's going to bring them down with Boabdil on January 2nd, 1492. Because Castile and Aragon, Isabella and Ferdinand didn't have much going for them. At all. In fact, a lot of people believe, in fact, there's a book by Stanley Lane Poole, The Moors in Spain. Well, he also wrote a book called The Moors After Spain. And he said Europe was never the same after the Moors were expelled. And they have been on decline ever since, you know. The only thing that saved them was black folk being enslaved. That's the only thing that saved what we call Eurasian civilization. Even the Chinese are in trouble. Chinese are in a lot of trouble. Lung cancer. See, before Crack Donald and Marlboro cigarettes and everything got into China, they were riding around on bicycles. They were eating green things. Now all of a sudden, they're eating the foods that's killing them. So don't worry about China. And Japan has a very serious problem. Japan has a very serious problem with population. Because one of the things that happened after World War II in Japan was the fact that Japan said, we'll never let this happen to us again. So the intelligentsia dedicated themselves to raising Japan to the level that it is today. But in so doing, they did not get married and have children. And the ones that did have children today are so caught up in their civilization and their culture, they're not getting married. So there is a literal, they are losing populations in Japan by millions of people every year. In fact, it's so bad in Japan that elders actually, they have hiring companies that actually will rent out families to older Japanese people. You can rent a family for the weekend. I'm telling you the truth. I saw an article on TV where they would, not that it was true, but I'm just telling you what I saw. This man was saying that he was too busy to have a family. But now that he looks back on his life, he wish he had a family. So the closest thing he can come to it is to rent this family of mother, father, and 2 children where they come to live with him for a while. That's Japan. See, but nobody tells us these things. Because they always show us Japan as the leading country in this, and it's not like that. It's not like that at all. In fact, if you look at what North Korea is doing over there, you'll see they're not threatened by Japan or China at all. Look at what they're doing over there. A man saying, yeah, watch this. Boom. Whoa, wow. He said, okay, now what you gonna do? He said, okay, now I'm gonna do a land to missile, a land to air, and then a water to air. And then guess what? The other day, what did they do? They did an underground explosion. And it registered like as close to an earthquake. Because North Korea said, well, what you gonna do? That is why Trump said that's their problem.
You don't want to do it.
Yeah, well, not only that, but he knows that there are things that he knows about what's going on over there. Don't you love Trump? You don't love Trump? Trump is my man. Come on. Look, you could bring Khalid Muhammad back. You could bring Elijah Muhammad back. You could bring Malcolm back. You could bring all the Black Panthers, all the Deacons of Defense, and none of them could have done in a year and a half what Trump has done to the Republican Party. He has done in a little over he has destroyed the Republican Party. They're sitting there in jitters. They don't know what to do. And the worse he gets, the more these crazy people love him. Watch him. Okay? Watch him. Trump is something else. But you know something? He is the signature of white supremacy at its best. Everything come out, it's right there. He said, I don't care who you are. If you don't look like me, in fact, if you ain't me, I don't like you. I love me. I don't care nothing about y'all. He destroyed Bush. He destroyed them all. He made Rudolph Giuliani look like a lap dog. He made Chris Christie, Big Mouth Chris Christie. He carrying his bags. He said, come here, boy. Think about what I'm saying, family. Look at it. See, I like to look at things from a different perspective. When we talk about the box, I like to look at things from a different perspective to give us another view towards what we're actually looking at. We are looking at rigor mortis setting in. But family, if we're not ready to do something, it doesn't make a difference what happens to them. If we don't have our economic system in place, if we don't have our educational system in place, if we don't have our political system in place, our legal system in place, say what you want about Saddam Hussein, but he kept them crazy people in line. Once he was gone, all the crazies went wild. So we need white supremacy around for a little while longer. Because at least it keeps things in order and arrangement. I know you may not like what I'm saying. Look at it from a strategic point of view. If white folk go down, what are we going to do? Where are our businesses? Where are our schools? That's it. So we have got to get ourselves together while this rigor mortis is setting in, so that when this body dies and we bury it, we'll be able to do something. But we have to understand our history. We have to understand what we've done. This is at a time when black men and women rule the world. We didn't ask nobody permission for nothing. We had our own books, our own universities, our own ways of bartering, of buying things. We had our own way of raising our children. Wasn't no children going to come up in our face and talk about, shut up, shut up. We know what we have to do for our children. We brothers know what we need. We were young brothers once. We know. We know by matter of degree what we have to do with our young brothers who are out here. We know what we have to do with street organizations. The street organizations are the gangs, if you want to call them that, are the most perfect family that exists. Everything that we as a family have not done for our children, the gang does. Gang leaders say, you hungry? I got you. You like these sneakers? Yeah, take them. I got your back. Anybody mess with you, you let me know. That's what a father's supposed to tell his son. Somebody mess with you, I got you. But where are our fathers? I'm not into nation building. I'm into empire building. Nations rise and fall. Empires last forever. Nations are built on people. Empires are built on families. Empires ain't built on baby daddies. We as brothers got to get a commitment to our sisters. We have got to step with them and let them understand that this is my son or this is my daughter. I am going to be here with you and for them. And as a kindergarten teacher, I can't tell you how many of my 5-year-olds and 4-year-olds said to me, you look like my daddy. I wish you were my daddy. Can I call you daddy? You know what my answer was? I am your daddy. For as long as you're in my presence, I am your daddy. And that is the African tradition. Every adult male in the community was Baba, and every adult female was Mama. We know how to do it. And you know, godmothers. We have 20 godmothers. That's it. And we could find a meal in somebody's house. That's the way it was. Yes. Yes. This is when we ruled the world. We didn't ask anybody for anything because ain't nobody had anything we wanted. In fact, they were asking us for everything. Come on. We know this. Here is the map of what we call Al-Andalusia. What's important about this map is Africans that came up into Europe, eventually they would come back down for a lot of different reasons. They would come back down and they would live in this territory here. They call it Al-Andalusia. And Al-Andalusia was bounded in the north. This is Portugal here. It was bounded by what's called the Sierra de Guadarrama, the Guadarrama Mountains. It's a mountain range. And it went straight over here, and it was bounded in the east by what's known as the Ebro River. Okay? And it came down from this area here, which would be Coimbra in Portugal, down, and it would follow along the coast. That would eventually become Moorish Spain, or Al-Andalusia, just to give you a sense of what geographically this area looks like. There's a story I tell about the geography. Here's the resource guide, and I'll move through this. But basically, Napoleon commented that Africa begins at the Pyrenees, which is the mountains that separate France from Spain. I talk about the three Moorish dynastic leaders 7 years after the capture of Gibraltar, which is known as Gebel Tariq, which is the mountain of Tariq. Tariq is going to be the invader at 711 that goes in. And the origin of the word Moor basically means black. And so that's why the concept of Moor is important to understand in what we call the Roman languages. And you have to include Romania in the Roman languages. Derivatives of the word Mora, Moreno, Moricao, Morio, Mora, all in these languages mean black, somehow mean black, Mora. And so the early Moors are going to be the Garamantes. That's going to be that North African group of people. But because of time, and please, those who have their finger on the time, Minister Brown, please let me know about my time. Because I don't want to get too deep inside of something, and so please let me know what my time looks like, Minister Brown.
Keep going.
Okay, so we talk about things, but I talk about the dynasties, okay? But what I really want to get you to understand is that women in Moorish Spain, the role of women, enjoyed more societal freedoms than in any part of the Islamic world. Please remember that you have two different types of Muslims at this time. You have the Eurasian Muslim and you have the African Muslim. The African Muslim is the original Muslim. And the Eurasian is the one that adapted to the precepts of what later would become what we call the Quran, or the Holy Quran. One of the big battles that took place in Spain was the relationship between Muslim men, because the Eurasian men were trying to get African Muslim women to be under control. And one of the things they used to say to the African Muslims, you know, you really got to get your woman in line. You say, oh yeah, you tell them that. You know, because brothers know sisters, okay? You tell Miriam that. Don't come to me and tell me that. Sister already told me what to do with myself if I even think about that. In fact, if I thought that, I'd have to wake up and apologize. I say that in jest, but the African tradition clearly has the male and female as balanced. That is the principle of marriage. That is something that we are suffering from as a people today. Men don't know the full potential of women, and women are not exercising their full potential because of that nature.
Say that again, brother.
And I'll tell you, you know, when sisters, you know, sisters from my experience, and brothers, I'm real proud. See, this is where my presentation splits. Up until now, all the brothers were with me. This is where some of the brothers are going to get tight-jawed with me, but bear with me, brothers, because I'm proud to be a man, and I understand my role as a man. But one of the things that liberated me, along with knowing my history, was understanding the role of women. And that liberated me as a man, because I understood the fact that everything that I may not be able to do, sisters do very well. Mm. And when we work together in balance and respect, you see, black folk don't live like this. We don't think like this. This is one of our mental issues, because we have people of other cultures telling us that we got to get our women in line. No. No, forget that. Forget that. Because you see, grandmothers give children what's known as them cast iron pots. Okay, in fact, I gave my daughter, both my daughters, cast iron pots. And I explained to them that I am your father, and I never put my hands on you. And if another man does, you have my permission to let him go to sleep. And you see this iron pot that I just bought? Wake him up to put him back to sleep. But there are also brothers that have high regard and respect for sisters also. And so I want to be as balanced with this as possible, because one of the things that I'm noticing in the world that we're living in is the idea of a woman getting paid less than a man simply because she's a woman. That's unheard of in African thought. We get cognitive dissonance when we start thinking like that. That's what makes us freak out. Because we can't conceptualize the inferiority of a woman because we love our mother so much. We love Lucille.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And that was because Lucille what? Worshipped the ground that her son walked on.
Mm-hmm.
Janet, my mother, she was my Hatshepsut.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I came from a womb that understood the balance. And so, by way of example, our mothers have been there for us, male and female. And for our brothers, you see, what you're listening to in rap, that's not the black community. That's white supremacy's perception of what they view.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're warped. They can't put it in their music, so they put it in ours.
Mm-hmm.
Because the first person that should pay the European male back for being terrorized should be his woman. Because he learned how to do to us what he did to us by doing it to his woman in the ice in Europe long before he came upon a black woman. In fact, when he met the black woman, what did he call her? My mammy. That was his mother. Because in his mind, that was his view. Psychologically, family, we have to begin to, we need counseling. We need counseling. Joy degree is right. Reparations, the root word of reparations is repair. We have to repair what's been done to us. And I think that we need, brothers, we need to get into a room. No sisters are allowed. Brothers, we all need to get into a room and have one big cry. I'm talking about that ugly in the face cry. That's why sisters can't be there. Because we got to get ugly in the face. You know when you cry and you get ugly? See, if I'm ugly and you ugly, we don't mind being ugly together. But when the sister's there, we're going to try to play off like we got that. But we do need counseling.
That's right.
We never had counseling. I know that as an educator in the Board of Education, when an incident occurred in the school, child got stabbed, incident occurred in the school, the psychologist, the school counselors, representatives of the superintendent's office would flock into that school and talk to the children, counsel them through that process. Now that's only one event that happened. What about us? After 400, 500 years, who counseled us out of our pain? Out of our trauma? Who counseled us out of that? I am amazed at how great we are without the counseling. We all should be stark raving mad or dead, considering what we've been through. But we're here. Powerful. So while there's a reason for us to have this feeling of being without a mother, well, look at what we did even with our mother. Half an hour? Okay, 4:30. Something I want to show you in terms of education. This was the curriculum. I've studied the curriculum close up in these subject areas. And I've attempted to develop a curriculum for our people based on this. When you look at the way in which they taught almost like the way an infant comes into existence. They taught almost like the way in which the creation story in the Shabaka stone, how the universe came into existence.
Mm-hmm.
They taught sequentially so that they built. I'll give you an example. The first thing that children learn in school basically is number sense. Okay? They learn by tally marks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They count up to 10. And then what happens is that from counting tally marks, they're then given symbols so that you don't have to do like 3 tally marks. There's one symbol for the letter 3. And for the 7, instead of doing 7 tally marks, there's a symbol for 7. From that point, you start to manipulate those symbols. We call it addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. All of those are related, by the way. Addition and subtraction is related, multiplication and division is related, and the way you know that is that if you did a multiplication chart, if you turned it sideways, it would be division. Same thing with addition and subtraction. They're all related. Okay? And so you learn 1 plus 1 equals 2. Now, when you get into your first year of high school and you learn algebra, what you are then introduced to is you're introduced to the same question, but you're searching for the unknown. So they take 1 out and put a symbol in. So instead of 1 plus 1 equals 2, 1 plus x equals 2. And then you got to solve for x. Now here's the balance. Algebra is ma'at. It's balance. The equal sign. Whether you're dealing with quadratic equations or whatever kind of equations you're dealing with balance. Because think about this. The law of reciprocity of ma'at. What goes around comes around. What you do on one side of the equal sign, you got to do on the other side. So if you got addition, you got to subtract. So you subtract, and then eventually x, you bring the 1 around. In bringing the positive 1 around, it becomes a negative 1. You subtract the 1 from the 2, and x equals 1. Sociologically now, I could teach a lesson on searching for the unknown and searching for the spirit within. So all of our subject areas are tied together because our ancestors didn't teach in subjects. The reason why we teach in subjects is to make money. They taught what we call the 7 liberal arts. They had the trivium and they had the quadrivium. This is what the Moors brought into Europe. This is what the Greeks learned from the Chemites. The trivium is grammar, logic, dialectic. Dialectic is the art of persuasion. Grammar is the art of organizing your writing. Logic is the art of thinking. The quadrivium is arithmetic and music, geometry and astronomy. All of the subject areas are infused in those 7 subject areas. If I had time, I would take you through I don't want to call it simple, but when I present it to you, I get a lot of aha moments. I hear in the group, aha, that's what we call aha moment. Because it's so out there in front of you. It's so there for you to see. But if no one ever fixes your eyes on something, you don't see it. I always say, once it reaches me, can't pass me. And that's how our ancestors taught. That's why they were able to do the great works that they were able to do, because they knew how to connect the neurons in the brain. We don't teach to connect neurons. The way we teach, when you take a standardized test, there's 2 ways you can pass. When you know the right answer, and when you know all the wrong answers. You want to pass the test? Vocabulary. Because even if you don't know the answer, if you know the meaning of the word, you can answer the question. Every test is a reading test. I used to work with Sylvans. Kaplans until they figured out what I was doing. See, I'm the spook who sat by the classroom door. And I used to watch these people. You know, I say, man, these people are something else. I think that Eurasians are a group of the most ignorant people that have ever lived in history. And I don't say that. Remember, the word ignorance is, I do not mean to not know. Ignorance is when you ignore what you should know. Ignorance. There are some of them that know the truth, but they're so scared. And they should be. Because if I were them, I would do the same thing. We need to educate our own children. That's our bottom line. That's my bottom line. In algebra, you have variables. You see, when you blame somebody for the condition you find yourself in, now I understand what they did, but I'm not blaming them anymore for the condition I find myself in. Because if you blame someone else for the condition you find yourself in, you give them the power to take you out of that problem, but you also give them the power to keep you in. Mm-hmm. But when you take full responsibility for the conditions that you find yourself in, and you don't blame nobody else for what condition you're in, you can, by any means necessary, do what you need to do. So when I'm doing my presentations and there are people who may not agree with me, I'm being euphemistic here, they don't agree with me, I tell them, but you ain't got nothing to say. Because did you hear me blame you? I ain't blame you. And in algebra, the only way you'll solve your problems is if you use the variables in your problem, in your challenge, to come to your answer. White folk ain't a variable in my problem. And once we take full responsibility for this, and a way to do that is to go into your pocket and get $18. Because when you can pay for your liberation, they have to shut their mouth. But as long as we have to be writing these grants, and as long as we have to eat the king's meat, you're going to have to dance to the king's tune. And that's just how it goes. You can try to be slick, and I'm going to be slick, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. Oh yeah, but they slick too. Mm-hmm. We have to finance our liberation. And I know people say that money is the root of all evil. But guess what? Money is also the root of our emancipation and liberation. And yes, you know, a tool and a weapon is the same thing. It's going to how you use it. So, in these subject areas, what you're looking at is the way in which they taught. Now, let's look at the universities that were set up in Europe. All these universities. Look at these universities here. Jean de Luz created these in Europe. In Bologna, Italy, 1158. Montpellier in 1180. Oxford in 1200. We're all so proud to go to Oxford. We say we went to Oxford. I'm a Rhodes scholar. We don't know who Rhodes is, but that's okay. That's another day. Cambridge, 1257. So proud. Went to Cambridge. We don't even know we built it.
Wow.
And some of them from when Holland and the British switched. In other words, this New York, what we call New York, was called New Amsterdam, right? And in South America, there was a country that we had, and somewhere in the 1700s, we switched. The British got New Amsterdam, and the Dutch got what was held by the British that we today call Suriname. There was a switch. So then New Amsterdam became New York, named after the Duke of York. British from Cambridge University and Oxford University came, and in a place that the Dutch called Haarlem, they built a university. And they called it, after their king, they called it King's College. Now, we're so proud to say we graduated from Columbia University, but we don't know we built it. Now, we're illiterate. We taught them how to read and write, how to calculate, and we're illiterate? No. If we are illiterate, it's because we go to schools that we call the boards of miseducation. Because their purpose is to miseducate our children. And it has to make sense. Why would they come in 3-hour trip or 2-hour trip from way out in their community where they pay all sorts of money that they make from teaching our children? They make all sorts of money to keep their children in the private schools in their neighborhood. They're going to come into our community and I'm supposed to believe that you're going to educate my child better than your child's being educated. You spend all that money. I would imagine you are purposely miseducating them so my child can't compete with yours. That makes a lot of sense to me. Now, what's the reality? The reality is that we're not going to do this overnight. Many of our parents are going to keep our children in boards of education. They're going to keep them in charter schools. That's going to be our reality. But remember Sylvans? Remember the commercial where the boy slides the skateboard across the kitchen floor? And the mother says, I told you, don't skateboard in the house. And the little boy says, well, look. And on it is a report card. And the mother says, oh, you got A's. Oh, my goodness, you were doing so bad before, now you're getting A's. I knew it was a great idea to send you to Sylvan. Now, Sylvans meets the child 3 times a week, 2 hours a day. I watch what they do. They model what the Nation of Islam did with drug abusers. What was the success of the Nation of Islam was that if you joined the Nation of Islam and you were into drugs or whatever, you were assigned somebody that used to be your coach. And every time you were about to slip back into something, your coach would be saying, come on, man, you know you can do this. Come on now, you can do this. And if you can get through 2 minutes of that twinge of wanting a drug, if you can get over that hump, you can go until the next time. And that coach was there to get you through. So personal time is very important to the learner. And what Sylvan does, it gives you a personal learner that takes you through the process. Now, if we were here at the Brooklyn Christian Center, we could set up our own after-school program. So what I'm saying is our children still can go to the public school system in the reality of mom having to work, but after that so-called day, they would come to us for them to learn their history, their culture, the role of melanin, the role of the Shabaka stone and the Dogon, and all the other subjects that they need to learn. How to take that old foolish test. Because you know, they came after me for a while because I was teaching how to pass this test. This test is not hard. It's not hard at all to pass a standardized test. In fact, it's quite simple if you just apply yourself to the rules of the game. So, we created those schools. And then I want to take you to the end of Moorish rule. By 1492, the Moors had lost all of Spain except the kingdom of Granada. And eventually the Moorish king Abu Abdallah, or who's also known as Boabdil, finally surrendered. The Moors lingered in Spain for a little more than a century. Many of them still remained, but by August, the Jews were expelled. The Sephardim were expelled. And then they went on a rampage of, even to this day, they have the Day of the Bonfire in Spain, where they took all of the African books and burnt them, because they said they were works of the devil. And while they were doing that in Spain, in America, the same Spaniards were burning the books of the Maya and the Olmecas, calling them works of the devil. But what I'd like to do now, and then of course, Catholic Spain compelled Spaniards to destroy many of the manuscripts. And so when everybody says to me, well, how can you prove it? I say, you burned it. What I'd like to do now is just show you the depth of spirituality, and then I want to show you some black folk in Europe. Of course, I was interested in becoming a priest. I grew up Roman Catholic. Oh yeah, I wanted to be a priest. I was a choir boy, altar boy. Whew. I could sing in Latin, talk in Latin. I spoke better Latin than the priest. Yes, I did, I'll admit it. I was downstairs in the church doing some work, and I came upon a book that spoke about the particular priesthood, the sect that I wanted to join. And it spoke about this particular sect protected the statue of Our Lady of Czestochowa in Poland from the Nazis. And in parentheses it said, Black Madonna and Child. At the time, I had met Professor Clark when I was 12 and a half, and through the years I had made contact. I was about 14 at this time, and I reached out to Dr. Clark and I asked him, I said, you know, Dr. Clark, I came upon this thing about a Black Madonna and Child. Now, for those of you who know Professor Clark and have spoken to him, you know that at some point in time, there'd be silence in his voice, and you could almost hear the smirk on his face. And he used to have that twisted smile, that smirk. I learned what it was after a while because I saw him do it enough times. But he said, why don't you come up here sometime and we'll talk about it. So the next opportunity that I had to visit the brother, he gave me a Xerox copy, which I still have somewhere in my storage, of an essay called The Boy Who Painted Christ Black. And I read that, and I called Dr. Clark. He said, come on up, we'll talk about it. And after the conversation, this, by the way, is the picture of Our Lady of Czestochowa. And long story short, after he told me what I needed to know, I packed up my surplice and my cassock and all the other ornaments of the Catholic Church. And my mother went out and bought a brand new bag, because that's how my mama was. If you're going to give it back, you got to give it back in class. So I went and I put it, and my supervising priest said, Booker, I think the church is losing you. And I said, Father, the church has lost me. I put that down, never went back again. Now, okay, that's good. Yeah. But I tell you that story because this is the Our Lady of Czestochowa, because I came to realize exactly who all this was about. I was 14 years old, sophomore in high school. I was shocked. Because I never saw no one look like that. I didn't even see the picture. It was just in parentheses. Black Madonna and Child. I had never heard that term before. Please, my sister.
You should have been in Chicago with us when we were demonstrating Gage Park. You never knew Gage Park existed.
Okay.
And we went into Gage Park, we had the Hungarians and the Polish.
Mm.
And they were out waving that Black Madonna.
Yes.
Angry and screaming. And
yes, yes.
Somebody said, look at her. Look at her.
Yes.
Tears.
Yes.
Never come back.
Yeah. Once it reaches, you can't pass you. It's in front of you all the time. When Pope John Paul went back to Poland, he kissed her feet. This is who they looked at, but hold on. This is Poland. Now let me show you what they look like in Europe. That's who they worship in Europe. That comes directly from Aset and Heru in the Osirian drama. Look at them, they're all black. In Italian, he's called the little black bambino.
But you know what they said? They said that there was a fire and all those
Yes.
and that smoke that made of light.
Absolutely, but isn't it interesting how particular that fire was? You know, he made her face black. What about the halo? What about the clothing? What about the crown? What about the
What
jewels?
about the nose? What about this?
That's it. That's it. That's it. I have a new word for that kind of thinking. I call it Trumpism. Please, brother.
I took an art class, and that's how he showed these pictures, and he said that it was made out of bronze. That's why.
Uh-huh. Yes. Yes.
Right, was made out of bronze.
Yes. It's absolutely amazing. Now, what I'd just like to wind down with us. Well, first, let's look here. Here is a picture of Chevalier Saint George. That's Chevalier Saint George. Okay? Now, just to give you a concept of it. What I'd like to do is just, well, what I'll do is this. I'll just show you this. Just keep in mind, this is Chevalier St. George. This is Alexandre Dumas. This is the father, Thomas Dumas. Okay, General Alexander Dumas. This is a silhouette of Ludwig van Beethoven. Now, when you're looking at Ludwig van Beethoven, look at his hair, for one thing, but also he has a prognostic jaw. They have created, in order to figure out the deepest sense of a person's closeness to Africa, African people have what's called a prognostic jaw. P-R-O-G-N-A-T-H-I-C, prognostic or prognosthis, jaw. They have what's called a craniometric machine. You can put a skull in a craniometric machine and it will measure the jaw. A jaw that measures 81, now you're on a 90-degree angle, a jaw that measures 81 degrees, up to 81 degrees, that's the prognostic. In other words, your nose bridge is parallel to your jaw. When you go from 81 to 90 degrees, it's called orthognathic, which means that your jaw starts to recede. Okay? When you get beyond 90 degrees, it's called a hypognathic jaw. See, we're dealing with science. That's why they don't invite me places, because I don't get emotional. This is science. Let's put your skull in a craniometric machine. He has a prognathic jaw. But let's move on. I want to show you some more pictures. This is Beethoven in his 30th year. Okay? See, visuals. Create the visual in your mind you'll never forget. Look at him here. You can tell where his hair is headed, right?
Back home.
It's already gone.
Yeah, it blends in the black background. See, here he is. Very dark. That's what his mask looked like, his death mask looked like. Check out his brow ridge, his nasal index. And see, these are African traits. The brow ridge, the nasal index. See, here's the prognathic. Up in here, look at the puff in his lip. See, you don't go by the thinness of the lip. You go by the mouth. Because you can have thick lips and a small, you can have thick lips and a small mouth. And you can have a big mouth and very thin lips. In fact, Eurasians have to be careful when they compare us to gorillas. Because gorillas have lips just like theirs. And also, if you shaved a gorilla, he'd be closer to Rush Limbaugh than to a person of African descent. Okay, now here is George Bridgetower, who was the mentee of Beethoven. And if you want more information on these people, go to World's Great Men of Color by J.A. Rogers. They have essays on these individuals. But he was an African. Okay. And just a final picture I want to show you of, that's what Alexander Dumas looked like. Now that brother got an afro up on him, don't he?
Yeah.
Look at him. He was called the romancer. He was the lover, so to speak. His son, Alexander Dumas III, revolutionized playwriting in France. So all three of the Dumas were geniuses in France. Now, what I'd like to do is this was an essay. I know my brother Big Man and Yusuf and my brother Muhammad. Remember back in the 1920s, in the year 2000, we started a 3-part series on the Crusades. And these were my notes for the Crusades. Don't have time to go through them, but I just wanted to let you know that the Moors are the reason why the Crusades took place. Because when Africans brought all the great things into Europe, they created a situation that the Europeans wanted, so they backtracked on all the roads and highways and byways that Africans went into Europe. Europeans took them back out, and that would lead to October of 1492 and the coming of Columbus. And so it's interesting that we are the reason in many ways why we're in the position that we're in today, because we introduced them to us. And they couldn't get enough of us. And if you watch them today, they still can't get enough of us. And one of the things that I just want to talk to you about, I have my DVDs that I brought with me dealing with the Crusades, and I brought some DVDs dealing with melanin. I've got a number of DVDs. But also, I came upon a sister about 2 years ago that was explaining to me that I was missing a large group of people by only doing DVDs. And so she encouraged me to start writing. And so I wrote my first book on William Leo Hansberry. Now, to know William Leo Hansberry was the first person of African descent to create an African studies program in an accredited college. He started the first African studies program at Howard University in 1923. The book that I wrote, I call A Libation, an Intellectual Libation, because I'm in the process of writing a series of books now. This is where my life has taken me, into writing books, beginning to write down some of my experiences. But I felt I needed to do a libation. I need to pay homage to the man that pretty much brought all of this information that we're seeking, the ways in which we develop it, all came out of his model of developing the first Black Studies program. This man went through a lot in his lifetime, as we all go through. But he had an extraordinary career, and he reinvigorated my work, because I came to realize that I don't have a right to complain. Considering what those that came before us did to get us to where we are, the stories that they could tell about what they did, what they didn't do, what they lost, what they gained. A lot of stuff is going on, and our children don't know this. And we've got to start our own educational system, family. And we have to start our own economic system. We have to buy black but sell to anybody. That should be our money. Because that's what they do, buy black but sell to anybody. And we have got to develop, because without economic freedom, we don't have intellectual freedom. But we also have to develop a military force that's going to protect us. So don't lose sight of that, because at one time we had everything, and somehow they came on us and they grabbed it. So we got to make sure that that never happens again. And so we have got to begin to look at this, and we have to go back into our history, and we have to understand what we've done and what we have yet to do. And we're going to do it. Right. And I'm just very happy to be back here, and I'm glad that Minister Brown invited me, because he and I go back a ways in terms of the work that we did. In fact, I posted something up online that you had done in your studio one time. I have my t-shirt on, and that was done on cassette. In fact, Minister Brown, I remember we were on 125th Street one time, and he had filmed a couple of things that wherever it may have been. And I remember he said to me, what did you think about that? And I said, what? He said, the cassette. I said, well, I never saw it. He said, well, why did you watch it? I said, because I don't have a video cassette machine. He looked at me. He said, wait a minute. Folk are doing all this taping of you, and you don't have a video cassette machine to watch yourself? I said, no, I don't. He went in the back of his car, pulled one out, and gave it to me. That's the first time I ever saw myself on video cassette. That video cassette now is on DVD. It's now on internet. And My brother Yusuf back there. Brother Yusuf, another great brother. He was a brother that used to bring me over to African Echoes. I didn't even have a car. Brother used to come pick me up and take me over to African Echoes in Newark, New Jersey, St. Rocco's. A long line of hard work. When Brother Minister talked about 40 years, I can't even compare to how many years you've been doing this. Many, many years. Yes? Okay. Yeah.
We need a Minister Brown Center so that he can show us what he is. So that we have, it's good to have the discourse in the community university, but if we don't take advantage of the people who have done that hard work, that is going to be like Langston's work and everybody else's work, we're going to be looking for the pieces. And if indeed we should lose them, and I hope we won't, but we need to set up an institute that is the Minister Brown Institute.
Absolutely. He probably has the largest collection. I remember I saw when the Namibian, when the Southwest African, the German flag came down,
yes,
and the Namibian flag went up. He's got that on tape.
I was there.
He was there. He taped it. You know, if you go online and see they came before Columbus, that's his tape. I was there.
Right.
We have this history. We can do this. That's what I really want us to walk away with. But if we walk through those doors, out the way we came in, not doing something, we wasted our time here today.
That's right.
We really did. I don't do concerts. I want to do work. I want to roll back my sleeves and assist our community and homeschoolers in developing that educational institution. I want to develop it. We did it before, we can do it again. We did it before white folk didn't exist on the planet. We did it. We built the first schools. We built the first economic systems. Absolutely. Absolutely. And you don't have to go back to Kemet for a classical African civilization. You can go back to the plantation. That was a classical African civilization. The civil rights movement was a classical African civilization. We had our pharaohs. And we had our freedom schools. Right in this room, you are classical Africans. You don't always have to go back to Egypt because remember, you are the best of the best. You have the DNA of the pyramid builders, you have the DNA of the plantation dwellers, you have the DNA of those who lived in projects, and you are the future who are going to march into the promised land. But you got to feel it and you got to know it, but to do it, you got to do something. You got to do something, family. We can't talk about this no more. We got to do it for our children, our young ones, and for the ones yet born. We got to get so tired of what we're experiencing. You want to march? March to the nearest black-owned business. March to the brother with the books back there. You want to march? March to the black business. Okay? I'm not into boycotting white business. I'm into buying out black business. I want to make it so that the vendors along Fulton and along, well, Harriet Tubman, I should say, and all along the streets that are selling their wares, I want them to have to go home early because they ain't got nothing else to sell. We bought it all. We need to put 10%. If you give 10% to the church, you can give 10% to our small black businesses. Take 10% of your net, not your gross, your net, 10%, and locate a black business that you want to spend your money with every month, and then build from there. When you do that, you'll change the structure of what we're facing. You'll change it just by that. You don't have to march on the right side, don't stop traffic, just march to the nearest black store. We can do this. Hotep family.
Brother Hiawatha.